controversial men in America today. He's the kind of guy many people, especially whites, love to hate. One former New York mayor referred to him as Al Sharpton. He's also a turnoff to much of the black establishment. But the white establishment media loves to publicize his every move, and he plays it like a fiddle. One Korean American publicly called for a Korean Al Sharpton, admitting that Sharpton, whom she considers, quote, a racial ambulance chaser, end quote, is a dependable gadfly who keeps many legitimate and painful issues in our face. He was found innocent in 1990 after a trial on a 67-count indictment, charging him with pocketing money from a student group. He's now considering representing New York as a United States Senator. I'm Tony Brown. In a moment, the man you'll love or hate. Reverend Sharpton, thank you very much for being with us on this program.
Thank you.
I want to start at my last statement. Are you considering running for the United States Senate from New York?
Well, I have been making very serious consideration. The people that are trying to run, Geraldine Ferrara, who ran for vice president, Robert Abrams, who's been the attorney general, those are not people that represent the issues that concern me or a lot of people in the state. So I'm considering it, especially when the Senate is now totally white. There are no blacks in the Senate. So I think that any state that has a large black population, that people ought to consider trying to make the Senate representative of the population.
Now, a Reverend Sharpton is not a typical black person, and a Reverend Sharpton would not be a typical black establishment senator, or as you are not a typical black leader. Where do you think this would put the black establishment?
Well, I am hoping it will put them in disarray. I think that the black establishment has failed the black community like the white establishment has failed the white community. I think that the day of sponsored leadership, of leaders that say what they think is going to make them available for funding or available for the applause of general America, rather than saying what they really believe and saying what will help our people, that day is over. In any country, you review leadership. In this country, every 4 years, we review the presidency. It seems that only black leaders lead until they drop dead or get too old and sick to be replaced. Certainly, if black America is in economic bad times, and it is, certainly if we're back into the jaws of racial violence, and we are, then we ought to review who is in the black establishment and what made them. In my judgment, it was sponsorship, but in others, they'll have to make their own decisions. But what makes them capable of continuing leadership when they have not solved our problems?
Well, who is the black leadership?
Well, I think that has been defined by a lot of the people that are in the white leadership. In my judgment, black leadership are those that have created a real following. People like Louis Farrakhan, people like the brother in Milwaukee. I think that many people have defined and carved out their own leadership based on a following. Though if you look at the general media, who they consider the established leadership, are people that they have assigned to leaders who couldn't get 5 people in Harlem to a rally if they was giving out free food and sandwiches.
Well, where would you put someone like the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is called by the white media and most of the black community the premier black leader?
Well, I think Reverend Jackson has at one point led an activist organization. Then he transformed himself into a politician. So I think one would have to determine what are the basis of his leadership. How are you going to gauge Reverend Jackson? Are you going to say he's a political leader? Then what political office has he maintained? If he's an activist leader, then he has missed the last 5 years of activism. If you talked about what has happened in this country that has reached international proportions in terms of recognition, from Howard Beach to Bensonhurst to Miami riots, certainly Reverend Jackson didn't lead any of them. Dr. King and others earned their leadership by leading the events of their day, Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery boycott. So it's strange to me that those events that have shaped the last 10 years in black America, those that are called leaders were very far away from those events. So it's suspicious at best and deceptive, in fact, to me, to see people assigned to leading a parade that they weren't even at the end of the line of.
Well, we have a phenomenon in the black community, which you're well aware of, and that is the Malcolm X's can't be leaders because they didn't go to college. They didn't belong to fraternities. They didn't have the norm of the black, I like to call it, ruling class. You fit that description. you are a very intelligent, educated man, but you are not a member of that establishment. You don't come out of that groove. Do you think that's a part of the questioning they have about you?
I think that it starts there. I mean, I grew up in the movement. I was youth director of Operation Breadbasket. I could have gone either way. I think that the problem they have with people like me is that we don't want to be controlled by the white liberal establishment. There is a white liberal establishment, and they lead the Democratic Party now, that decides what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and you can't offend them. Liberals, to me, have been more racist and more detrimental to us than have hardcore conservatives. And I think that that is part of the problem. I think the fact that 30 years since Malcolm's death, kids are walking around with Malcolm on their lapel shows that they were wrong 30 years ago about Malcolm, they're wrong now, and they're wrong about those of us that come in that tradition. Adam Clayton Powell was as much or more of a leader than anybody that they tell us about during Black History Month in white-controlled black colleges or white colleges. Adam Clayton Powell did everything Dr. King did 20 years before he did it. Why don't they tell us about Adam Powell? Because they don't want us to talk about audacious power politically, economically. They want us to talk about being subservient, and they want us to talk about trying to emulate and imitate them because they then maintain their supremacy status if that is the goal of the movement.
You're talking about, when you say them, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about the white liberal establishment. It is fine as long as the Harper Village Voice syndrome appoints you as an approved leader. But they had problems with people like Adam, who was well educated, who did come out of an established family. But Adam just didn't have the habit of scratching where he wasn't itching and laughing at what wasn't funny. And the same with Malcolm, the same with Elijah Muhammad. So here you have people that reached the pinnacle of power, that had millions of people following them, but they were not legitimate leaders. But you take some guy that they take out of a school and they make him Dr. So-and-so and put him over to NAACP, he becomes a leader, even though if he came through Harlem, he would need police protection to get down one block.
Now, the people you've mentioned that you admire as leaders, McGee in Milwaukee, Minister Farrakhan, the other people are classified as radical by the very people that we're discussing, by the black establishment leadership. Are you saying then that black America would be better off with a, quote, radical leadership rather than the kind of leadership that we presently have?
I think that there's a word game with radical, because radical what? There's some that have very conservative views. I think Minister Farrakhan in many ways have very conservative views when it comes to personal life, marriage, and other things. So radical according to whose definition? What I say is that they're leaders, because I can see their following. Anytime you have a man like Farrakhan can go to any major city in the United States and draw 20,000 people, I don't need a white hippie to tell me he's a leader or that he is not a leader, and that I'm having a hallucination when I see all of these people following him. And I see the same people send in people that are ahead of these established, so-called established civil rights organizations, and they can't fill the basement of a Jack and Jill club in a B city. So I think that my question is not even who I admire, it's who the community rallies around. And these people have not demonstrated a following. They have not just demonstrated the capacity to do anything but get major funds from white people and tell them what they want to hear.
Now, your critics, especially white critics, whose neighborhoods you have marched in and so forth, say you're simply an opportunist, and you don't mean any of that, that you will seize upon any event just to promote yourself.
Well, I think that that is a criticism that comes with the territory. They used to say that about Martin Luther King. Now they just had all kind of memorials for him recently for his birthday. You know, he marched in white neighborhoods. So I think, you know, what I think a lot of white liberals do is they like us better dead than alive. If I'm an opportunist, then they'd have to reveal what have I gained from it. I've been stabbed, I've been indicted, I certainly don't have a lot of money. So if I'm an opportunist, I'm an incompetent opportunist. I think what the reality of it is they wrote books on Bensonhurst and made money. They wrote books on the Howard Beaches and made money. I did the events, they made the money off the events, and then they turn around and call me the opportunist. I think that that is a lot of hoopla at best, and I don't even entertain that. I think that really, if they felt that all I was doing was making money, they wouldn't have a problem with that. The problem is that white kids went to jail in Howard Beach and went to jail in Bensonhurst, and white liberals are not accustomed to their children being locked up with mine.
What about the charge that you, in effect, have taken money and that you have informed? You've been an informer for the government, the federal government.
Well, I think if that was so, then the government would have no problem with me. Certainly the government wouldn't have indicted me on 67 counts if I was of use to them. Why would the government be trying to put me out of business? One of the oldest tricks they used in the 60s in the Black Panther Party was the informant story. What we did was openly said we wanted drug dealers out of our community. We challenged those that paid taxes to bust them. They didn't, and then they would slip into the media that we were an informant. I am an informant against racists and drug dealers. I publicly say I inform the public and anybody else that will listen to me that I want racists and drug dealers locked up, and I ought to be applauded for that. That is not a scandal. That is, in fact, what we're supposed to do.
Now, in Penthouse Magazine, a recent interview, you said directly, I did inform the government against drug dealers.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think that all of us ought to do that. It seems very strange to me that the same media that will condemn me for saying we want drug dealers out of the community praises a guardian angels or praises others that fight against ills in their community. I don't understand why there's that double standard, or maybe I do understand it. Maybe they really don't want us to get the drug dealers out of certain communities. Maybe they just have a problem when we try to challenge them to do what they say is consistent. What is a better life for us. I think the government has a responsibility that if they're going to collect my taxes to make it work for me like it does for anybody else in the country.
Do you believe there is such a thing as, quote, the plan? You've heard of the plan, a conspiracy on the part of a white ruling class to get rid of black people in America?
Well, if it's not a plan, it's definitely a pattern that has worked to the detriment of our people. We must remember we were not brought here to be anything but a free and then cheap labor base to build this country. Institutional racism has set in so that you don't have to have a conspiracy meeting every Friday night in some room in the Pentagon. It is set in so much in the institutions of this country that it just takes care of itself. So I think that if we're running around looking for a group of conspirators, that we may never find that. But if we look at policies that have been established that unilaterally keep an underclass and to keep people of color in a condition that is subservient to others, that is what the United States was built on. Now, what do you do about that? You don't run around just crying conspiracy. You lift yourself up. You may have been knocked down by somebody else, but you'd be a fool to expect those that knocked you down to extend a hand to help you up. If they wanted you up, they wouldn't have knocked you down in the first place.
Now, are you at all concerned about the way you're perceived? You have a very high name recognition, but you have a very large negative name recognition also. Does that worry you?
Oh, no, I think that we need to have people in this society that are not afraid of being controversial, not afraid of being unpopular in some areas, so that they can break through what needs to be broken through, and that is the pain and affliction that is going on in some communities. I think that the problem that we've had is in the last couple of decades, we've gone from leadership that did not mind being unpopular to those that wanted to be politicians. And now you have politicians and foundation recipients leading a moral movement. They cannot lead a moral movement. Moral movements must be led by people that don't mind being on the cutting edge, that don't mind taking the flack for doing that. Martin Luther King and others that led in the 60s, Elijah Muhammad that led in the 60s, were not trying to win opinion polls and were not trying to get foundation grants. They have been replaced by those that have come in their name trying to do that. And I think that has been the detriment of the movement. I think you need those that are going to be in office and popular, but you need those that are going to be on the outside to challenge the system and that could care less about what people thought about him. Adam Clayton Powell, when I was a kid, he described himself as saying he's the only man in America that didn't give a damn. I've tried to live up to that motto.
What about the white media in particular? They profess that you are not legitimate, but you probably get more media coverage than not of any black in this country. You certainly get as much as any other. How do you, is it true that you really know how to finesse the media? Do you manage them? Are you something that they have to have more of? What is this relationship between Al Sharpton and the mainstream media?
I think the mainstream media recognizes that there is an undercurrent of rage in the black community, and they try to tell people that it's not there, but that they can't resist dealing with it because they live with it every day. They ride the subways in major urban cities. They walk the streets, so they know that I'm not talking illusion. So they try to kill the messenger while they deal with the message. How could I manage Fortune 500 controlled media? How could any young black guy out of the ghetto with no money just sit up and manipulate the CBS's, ABC's, PBS's for that matter, of this world. I mean, that is the ultimate compliment for them to say that I manipulate them. Here are guys that went to school and colleges and all of this to learn journalism, and here comes a little preacher out of the ghetto that just plays at night with manipulating them, and they helplessly run and cover me. Now, I mean, if people believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I will sell them.
You, speaking of bridges, you recently led a self-respect march, and this was after a very unfortunate incident not too long ago in which 9 people were killed attempting to get into a rap event. It wasn't a concert, but it was an athletic event with rap stars, and there are a lot of accusations, and I'm not asking you to get into that, but you led a march in which you indicted, if I may say that word, if I'm misstating you, correct me, you indicted black people for the events that took place that day. Would you help me understand what your position is?
My position is that while we must always challenge the overall society in terms of fairness and justice, we must also challenge ourselves with self-discipline and self-respect in our conduct. For young people to stampede and to the point of killing each other, some 9 of us, into a basketball benefit, to me, yes, the police should have provided security. Yes, the school should have had security. But even when we had to go in the back door, no one had to stop us from stampeding each other. I don't see them stampeding themselves into lectures of people teaching them African history. I don't see them stampeding themselves in economic development seminars. So at some point, you have to also challenge those young people to, yes, you're oppressed, but that doesn't mean you help your oppressor kill you by saying, look, I'll make it easy. You don't have to come in and shoot me to death. I'll stampede myself to death. There must be responsibility put on both sides. The key to any revolution was self-discipline, and anybody serious must challenge their own as well as the other side.
Do you feel that your message has sufficiently been gotten out, the message you're giving now? I don't think anybody can argue with that, and many other things that you've said. Do you feel that the general population, and whites in particular, do you feel they really know what you mean, or do you feel basically they know of what your image is that has been created?
I think that they look one-dimensional. They have the image that all I do is march in white neighborhoods and bother very nice old white people and accuse them of racism. They don't know that we painted crack houses to try to eliminate drugs in the community, and that was the first death threats that we felt that we had to deal with. They don't know that we have an economic development program that we endorse. They don't know that I'm challenging black entertainers to become accountable to the black community.
Tell me about black entertainers. In Penthouse, you were very critical of a number of them. Tell me about that.
Well, I think that anytime you have someone like a Michael Jackson, who has come out of the black community, who was nurtured by black radio, who was supported by black consumers. It was black kids that took their quarters and their dollars and made him a megastar. And then he gets to Hollywood and he doesn't know whether he's black or white. He doesn't give blacks jobs. He's not involved in any constructive economic development of his community. Then he ought to be boycotted just like whites are boycotted. And maybe even more so, because in my judgment, he becomes a traitor to the people that made him. If you don't want to be black, then don't come out of black radio. Don't ask black consumers to make you. And then when you become this Hollywood megastar, you get amnesia. Frank Sinatra never divorced himself from his roots. Tony Bennett never divorced himself from his roots. It would be unimaginable for Frank Sinatra to go on tour and Italians not make money. So why do blacks have to beg Michael Jackson to please give us a donation when we ought to be his accountant, his lawyer, his travel agent? We ought to be the promoters of his concerts, and black kids ought to be making money in every city that he tours in. We must make these people accountable to us because we created them. We should not ask for a favor out of something that we created. I think that Michael has become an example of the type of black ingratitude that ought to be disciplined by the black community with boycotts and with withdrawals. And let's see how big he is if his base leaves him. If he doesn't know if he's black or white, let's help him make up his mind by withdrawing black support.
Now, I've heard this argument a lot. A lot of people say that many people were helped by the NAACP, and the NAACP has done a lot of things for a lot of black people. And that when they got where they were going, meaning in the white world, they didn't relate back, they didn't join NAACP, they don't relate to black organizations. Do you think that that reflects on us? In other words, you're raising 2 daughters, I believe.
Right.
You are instilling in them values. If you don't instill values in them and they get out in the world and they do something that you didn't teach them to handle, then can you blame them? In other words, what I'm saying is, can we blame the Michael Jacksons for not relating to the black community, when somehow in our community we aren't telling young blacks that in order for you to get there, I helped you there, and therefore you've got to bring somebody up? Where is the real problem?
I think the problem starts with that. I think that we have not instilled a lot of values. I think you have to start at the home and the church and the school to instill those values early. But at the same time, that is no excuse for them that understand the ways of the world economically, that they have to do things to get a contract. They should also have to do things to continue the consumer support. So I think it's one and two going together rather than one as opposed to two. I think that we have the obligation of letting those artists know that there were many artists that suffered in order for them to now perform in any music hall in the United States. Michael Jackson can't outdance James Brown. What gave Michael Jackson exposure to America was the civil rights movement made America open to him. James Brown could have outdanced him anytime, but America was not open when James Brown was young and dancing. So he was limited to the Chitlin circuit. So really it was a lot of old blacks that marched and got beat in the South that crossed over Michael Jackson, that crossed over Lionel Richie. CBS marketing department didn't cross them over. They had the options open to cross them over because of the civil rights movement. And that's what Michael should learn. And if he didn't learn it at home, we ought to teach it to him now, where he has the economic option of falling down or standing up by being accountable to those that open the door to him.
Well, I think the economics you talk, people higher up will certainly understand. We're now in 1992. We're talking about an election. Governor Wilder, the only black in the Democratic primary, has dropped out. There are other rumors that blacks are now going to embrace Governor Clinton. He's supposed to be the end candidate now with the black leadership. What do you feel about that?
I think that what our concern must be a black agenda. We must deal with, we need the economic control of our communities like everyone else in these United States. So whoever we support, I don't want them telling me that we will give you some federal handouts. Let's start right now in the primaries. What contracts will blacks have in the Democratic Party? Will we have our main share or a basic share of the contracts they spend millions of dollars just running for office? You don't have to tell me what you're going to do after you get elected. I'm going to look at how you spend your dollars now and know whether you mean it or not. Don't tell me you have a $50 million budget to run for president, $49 million is going to your cousin, but you'll take care of me if you get in office. No, take care of me on the way to office, so if you lose, we can all go to a suite of rooms and cry together with our pockets full.
What about Governor Wilder dropping out?
Well, I think Governor Wilder was a man that had a problem early in the game. He tried to be everything but black. He was a fiscal conservative, which doesn't make him not black, but I mean all of his policies was very much away from black interests. Then he tried to get black late in the game. And one thing that black people have is we have a good nose. We can smell game a mile away because every game in the world has been ran on us. I think Mr. Wilder came too little too late, and that is why his candidacy did not work. I think what will happen is that there will be either someone that will sincerely come to the black community talking turkey and putting some money on the table in terms of contracts, in terms of development, in terms of curriculums of inclusion of our history, or that you will have a lot of black people that will go fishing on election day. Now, I'm sure we will have a lot of the black establishment standing in line to get their checks, but I'm telling white politicians now, you better stop payment on those checks. Those people cannot deliver. You're going to have to talk real to the masses, or you're just giving your money away to some Negroes that couldn't deliver their mother to the polls come election day.
Now, I've talked a lot about who didn't like Rev Sharpton. Who does like Rev Sharpton?
Well,
where is your base? What group or class of blacks support you?
Our support comes from various levels of the community. We rally every Saturday in Harlem, and our place is packed. You've been the one. We have a lot of support in our community across class lines because people realize that racism still exists in this country. Just in 1991, which we just recently concluded, you had everything from Rodney King to Crown Heights. So for people to feel like that I'm having an hallucination, many black people understand that it is not an hallucination. Racism is alive. We must make one standard of justice in this country. All I'm really saying is that we need equal protection under the law. If blacks are murdered, murderers ought to go to jail just like when whites are murdered. And I am challenging the present system that be to become fair. I'm not burning down the courthouse. I'm marching on the courthouse. And there are those coming behind me, though, that will not be appealing to the system. They will say, let's burn it down and forget about it. So people like me are maybe the last opportunity for white America to deal equally and fair with black people.
In retrospect, do you believe you were set up in the Tawana Brawley case? Do you believe that you were told a lie and that you were used as her consultant?
No, I believe Tawana. I believe the grand jury that said they did not have enough evidence, did not seek that evidence. I think that they tried from the beginning to discredit her. And the vindication of that is there was a case right after that in New York where a young girl was raped in St. John's University. Even 2 of the people that were involved pleaded guilty. She went to trial with 5 of them, and that jury said she was lying, and they let them go. I think that there is still a hard time in America for a black woman to prove rape. So I do not feel Tawana in any way misused me. I think that Tawana is just another of black women that could not get justice in this society.
We have a minute left. What would you like to leave us with about Reverend Al Sharpton?
I think that the Al Sharptons of this world are created by the existing institutional racism. If people really do not like the attention I get, they ought to spend more attention and more time trying to solve the racial disparities in this country, and then I'll go home to my 2 daughters and they won't have to worry about me again. But don't ever expect me to suffer in silence. If I can't do nothing but make noise and let you know I'm hurting, I'm going to do that. At least you should not be comfortable while you try to exploit and oppress me.
I think that's quite a mouthful, and I'd like to thank you very much. I think we've covered quite a bit of territory, and I'd like to thank you for being with me on this program. We will see in the near future what you do with regard to your decision to run for the United States Senate from New York.
Well, whatever my decision, I intend to stay out front on the case, and I intend to continue to raise the issues of my people.
All right, and we will thank you once again, and we'll keep an eye on what you're doing.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks a lot.